The letter was written in French. Bruce Lee could not read a word of it, but Alain Delon could. And as the most famous actor in France read the letter aloud, his voice began to tremble. They were backstage at the Cannes Film Festival, May 1972. Two legends from opposite sides of the world, brought together by a film screening that had just ended. Bruce had never met Alain Delon before tonight. He knew the name. Everyone knew the name. The French actor with the ice blue eyes who had conquered European cinema. The man they called the most handsome actor in the world. But Bruce had not expected this. He had not expected Alain Delon to approach him after the screening with tears in his eyes. He had not expected Alain to hand him a crumpled letter and say, "You need to hear this." He had not expected the next 15 minutes to change how he understood his own impact on the world. The letter was from a young man in Paris, a fan who had written to Alain Delon 3 years earlier, asking for help. But the help he needed was not from Alain. It was from Bruce Lee. Cannes, France. May 14, 1972. The Cannes Film Festival was the most prestigious film event in the world. Directors, actors, producers from every continent gathered each year on the French Riviera to celebrate cinema. Bruce Lee was there for the international premiere of Fist of Fury. The film had already broken records across Asia. Now it was being introduced to European audiences for the first time. The screening had been extraordinary. The French audience, known for being sophisticated and demanding, had erupted with applause. They had gasped at the fight sequences. They had cheered at the final confrontation. They had given Bruce a standing ovation that lasted 4 minutes. Bruce was overwhelmed. He had expected skepticism from European critics. He had expected them to dismiss his films as lowbrow action entertainment. Instead, they had embraced him. After the screening, there was a reception backstage. Critics, distributors, fellow filmmakers mingling with champagne and conversation. Bruce stood near the edge of the room, still processing the reaction. Linda was beside him, radiant in her evening gown, fielding questions from journalists. And then Alain Delon appeared. He moved through the crowd like a ship through water. People parted for him automatically. He was magnetic in a way that few people ever achieve. "Mr. Lee," Alain said, extending his hand. His English was accented but clear. "I must speak with you." Bruce shook his hand. "Mr. Delon, it is an honor." Alain shook his head. "No, the honor is mine. What you did on that screen tonight, I have never seen anything like it. You have created something new." Bruce smiled, accepting the compliment gracefully. But Alain was not finished. "There is something I need to show you. Something I have been carrying for 3 years, waiting for the right moment." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A letter, clearly old, clearly handled many times. "This was sent to me in 1969, Alain said. "It was from a young man in Paris. He wrote to me asking for help. But the help he needed, I could not provide. Only you could." He held out the letter. "I do not read French," Bruce said. "Then I will read it for you. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding." Alain Delon began to read. "Dear Mr. Delon, my name is Pierre Dubois. I am 19 years old. I am writing to you because I do not know who else to ask. I have a younger brother named Marcel. He is 17. 2 years ago, he was in an accident. A car struck him while he was crossing the street. He survived, but his legs were badly damaged. The doctors said he would never walk again." Alain paused, looked at Bruce, then continued. "Marcel was a dancer before the accident. He had trained since he was 8 years old. He was accepted to the Paris Opera Ballet School. He was going to be a professional dancer. That was his entire identity. When he lost his legs, he lost himself. He became angry, violent. He refused to leave his room. He talked about ending his life. My parents were terrified. Then something strange happened. Someone gave Marcel a bootleg film from Hong Kong. A martial arts film. The picture quality was terrible. The sound was worse. But Marcel watched it over and over again. The film was called The Big Boss. The star was a man named Bruce Lee. Bruce's breath caught. He had not expected his name in this letter. Alain continued reading. Marcel became obsessed with this man. He watched every movement. He studied every technique. He said that Bruce Lee moved like a dancer, that his martial arts were a form of dance. And then Marcel started training. He could not use his legs, but he developed exercises for his arms, for his core, for his upper body. He said he was learning to fight the way Bruce Lee fought, but adapted for his wheelchair. The doctors said it was impossible. My parents said he was delusional. But Marcel did not care. For 6 months, he trained every day. He got stronger. His arms became powerful. His movements became precise. And then he started teaching. Other young people in wheelchairs came to him. He taught them what he had learned. He created a martial art for people who could not walk. He called it the way of the seated dragon. Alain stopped reading. His voice was thick with emotion. This next part, he said, "This is why I have carried this letter for 3 years." He continued, "Mr. Delon, I am writing to ask if you can help me find Bruce Lee. I want to tell him what he has done for my brother. I want him to know that a man in Hong Kong, making films, saved a boy in Paris who wanted to die. Marcel does not know I am writing this letter. He would be embarrassed. But I had to try. My brother is alive because of Bruce Lee. He has purpose because of Bruce Lee. He is teaching others because of Bruce Lee. If you can find him, please tell him. Tell him that the dragon can fly even without legs." Alain folded the letter. The backstage area had grown quiet. Other people had noticed the two famous men in deep conversation. They had given them space. Bruce stood motionless, processing what he had just heard. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you not send this to me before?" Alain shook his head. "I tried. For 3 years, I tried. I contacted your studio in Hong Kong. I contacted martial arts organizations. I even hired a detective. But you were impossible to reach. You were either filming, or traveling, or training. No one could get a message to you." He looked at Bruce. "When I heard you would be at Cannes, I knew this was my chance. I brought the letter with me. I have been waiting for the right moment since the festival began." Bruce reached out and took the letter. He could not read the French words, but he held it carefully, reverently. "This boy, Marcel. Do you know what happened to him?" Alain smiled. "That is the other thing I must tell you." He gestured toward the entrance of the backstage area. "He is here. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered." A young man in a wheelchair emerged from the crowd. He was perhaps 20 now, lean and muscular in his upper body. His wheelchair was customized, sleek, clearly designed for mobility, and his arms were covered in small dragon tattoos. Bruce watched him approach. The young man's face showed a mixture of terror and awe. "This is Marcel Dubois," Alain said. "I invited him to Cannes. I did not tell him why. I wanted this to be a surprise." Marcel stopped his wheelchair a few feet from Bruce. His hands were shaking. "Monsieur Lee," he said. His English was heavily accented but understandable. "I cannot believe I am meeting you." Bruce stepped forward. He knelt down so his eyes were level with Marcel's. "I just heard your story," Bruce said. "Your brother wrote to Mr. Delon 3 years ago. He told him everything." Marcel's eyes widened. He looked at Alain, then back at Bruce. "Pierre wrote to you?" "He wrote to Mr. Delon," Bruce said. "He asked Mr. Delon to find me, to tell me what you had accomplished." Marcel's face transformed. Shock, embarrassment, and then something else. Pride. "I did not know," Marcel whispered. "Pierre never told me." "He told Alain that you created a martial art," Bruce said, "for people in wheelchairs. He called it the way of the seated dragon." Marcel nodded. "It started as just exercises, things to make me stronger. But then I realized that martial arts is not about legs. It is about energy, about intention, about using what you have." He looked at Bruce with intensity. "You taught me that. Watching you move, seeing how you adapted to every situation. You were like water. You flowed around obstacles." He gestured at his wheelchair. "I cannot flow around this obstacle, but I can flow within it. I can find power in what I have instead of mourning what I lost." Bruce was silent for a moment. Then he asked a question that surprised everyone. "Will you show me?" Marcel blinked. "Show you? Your martial art. The way of the seated dragon. Will you demonstrate?" Marcel looked around. They were backstage at the Cannes Film Festival. Celebrities and critics surrounded them. This was not exactly a training hall. "Here?" Bruce smiled. "Here." The crowd pulled back, creating a small clearing. Someone moved a table. Someone else pushed chairs aside. Marcel wheeled himself to the center of the space. And then he began to move. What happened next would be talked about at Cannes for years. Marcel Dubois, a young man without the use of his legs, demonstrated a martial art that no one had ever seen before. His arms moved with incredible speed and precision. His wheelchair became an extension of his body, spinning and pivoting with his movements. He demonstrated strikes, blocks, and combinations that were adapted perfectly for seated combat. His core strength was remarkable. He could twist and rotate in ways that amplified his upper body power. He could generate force from angles that standing martial artists could not achieve. and his creativity was stunning. He showed how the wheelchair itself could be used as a weapon, how the wheels could trap an opponent's legs, how the armrests could deflect attacks, how the low center of gravity provided stability that standing fighters lacked. The demonstration lasted 8 minutes. When it ended, the backstage area erupted in applause. But Bruce Lee did not applaud. He walked forward, knelt in front of Marcel, bowed deeply. A formal bow. The bow of one martial artist to another. "You have created something I never could," Bruce said. "You have taken principles I only talked about and applied them in ways I never imagined." He stood up. "I want to learn from you." The room fell silent. Bruce Lee, the most famous martial artist in the world, had just asked to learn from a young man in a wheelchair. Marcel stared at him in disbelief. "You want to learn from me?" Bruce nodded. "I teach that martial arts must adapt to the individual, that there is no single correct way, that each person must find what works for their body, their attributes, their situation." He gestured at Marcel's wheelchair. "You have proven this more completely than any demonstration I have ever given. You have shown that the principles work universally, that a person with different abilities can become a complete martial artist." He placed his hand on Marcel's shoulder. "That is something I need to understand better. That is something you can teach me." The conversation continued for 2 more hours. Bruce, Marcel, and Alain moved to a private room. They talked about technique, philosophy, adaptation. They discussed how Marcel had developed his system, how he trained his students, how he had created something new from something old. Bruce took notes. Actual notes, in a small notebook he carried everywhere. "This is Jeet Kune Do," he said at one point. "This is exactly what Jeet Kune Do is supposed to be. You absorbed what was useful from my films. You rejected what was useless for your situation, and you added what was specifically your own." He showed Marcel the notes he had taken. "I will incorporate these principles into my teaching. I will tell the world about the way of the seated dragon. I will make sure people know that martial arts belongs to everyone." Marcel was overwhelmed. "I started this because I did not want to die," he said quietly. "I just wanted a reason to keep living. I never thought it would become something real." "It is real," Bruce said. "It is more real than most martial arts I have seen, because it comes from necessity, from survival, from the deepest kind of human determination." He looked at Marcel with profound respect. "You are the dragon," he said, "and the dragon does not need legs to fly." Before they parted that night, Bruce made a promise. "When I return to Hong Kong, I will send you everything. Training materials, films, books, anything that might help you develop your system further." And he made another promise. "I will come to Paris before the end of the year. I want to train with you. I want to learn the way of the seated dragon directly from its creator." Marcel nodded, still barely believing what was happening. They exchanged addresses. They shook hands. And then, in a gesture that surprised Marcel, Bruce embraced him. "Thank you," Bruce whispered, "for reminding me why I do this." Bruce Lee kept his first promise. Within weeks, packages began arriving at Marcel's apartment in Paris. Training films, technical books, personal notes from Bruce's own development of Jeet Kune Do, and letters. Regular letters from Bruce, asking questions, offering suggestions, continuing the conversation they had started at Cannes. But Bruce never kept his second promise. He never came to Paris. On July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee died in Hong Kong. He was 32 years old. Marcel learned of Bruce's death from a radio report. He sat in his wheelchair in his small apartment and wept for hours. The man who had saved his life. The man who had seen him as an equal. The man who had promised to come learn from him. Gone. But Marcel did not let grief destroy what they had built. He continued teaching. He continued developing the way of the seated dragon. He continued spreading the principles that Bruce Lee had taught him. Over the next 4 decades, Marcel Du Bois trained thousands of students. People in wheelchairs. People with missing limbs. People with conditions that traditional martial arts schools refused to accommodate. He created an organization, a certification program, a network of instructors across Europe. And at every school he founded, at every training hall he opened, there was a photograph on the wall. Bruce Lee and Marcel Du Bois, backstage at Cannes. May 14, 1972. The dragon who flew and the dragon who proved flight had nothing to do with legs. Alain Delon kept the letter from Pierre Du Bois. When interviewers asked him about his career highlights, he always mentioned that night at Cannes. "I have worked with the greatest directors," he would say. "I have been in films that will last forever. But the moment I am most proud of is introducing Bruce Lee to Marcel Dubois. He would pause, because I saw something that night that I have never seen before or since. I saw one legend recognize another. I saw mastery bow to innovation. I saw proof that art transcends ability, transcends limitation, transcends everything except human spirit. Pierre Dubois, who wrote the original letter, became a documentary filmmaker. His most famous film was about his brother Marcel in The Way of the Seated Dragon. It won awards across Europe. It was dedicated to Bruce Lee, the man who made it all possible. May 14, 1972. Cannes, France. A letter written 3 years earlier. A meeting that almost never happened. And a lesson that echoes still. The dragon does not need legs to fly. It only needs spirit. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life themes.